So as I was saying before I was interrupted, local creditors were made to accept 15-year bonds, stretching well into 2035, long after some of them, unfortunately, would have died and passed on. That is the reality, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So 10 years, to me, may reflect a measure of a lack, or a lack of a measure of confidence in the Barbados economy. Obviously, external creditors would take on board the concept of the time value of money. Time value of money. And I do not know that enough emphasis was placed on this when the credit arrangements were forced on the local credit community here when government restructured its debt. But you would know, Mr. Speaker, that in 2035, what $1 today buys at its value will no longer be the case. So the external creditors are taking on board the consideration of the time value attaching to money, and therefore you get 10 short years. 10 short years. Pensioners here in Barbados, under the domestic arrangements, got caught up in this. And it may be harsh language to suggest that they were cheated in this manner, but I hope I'm understood when I say that. And I don't use that term in a pejorative manner with reference to the actions of government. People lost on their investment, and that must be made to be understood. They lost in terms of the haircut they got. They lost in terms of the time period over which these bonds now have to stretch before maturity, and they lost in terms of reference to the time value placed on money, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and the truth, the full truth has to be told. The external creditors refused to accept what was forced on the domestic creditors here in Barbados. They did. Now, you know, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to get into any political mischief, but let's go, because I have to respond to the member for Christchurch, East Central. He said the last government left a precarious debt situation to the incoming administration. Everybody understands that. It has been said in here and outside of here, correctly so, several times. They left an untenable debt situation. They left the country in a precarious debt situation for the incoming administration. He said, and it was repeated by the two honorable gentlemen who succeeded me to their feet, they said, and he said, rather than do what they should have done, they kicked the can down the road. There are those who would say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that with reference to these debt arrangements into which the government of Barbados has entered with the external creditors, that this administration has kicked the debt can down the road. You think about it. They have kicked the last administration, according to them, did not do what it should have done. It did not default on debt. It did not restructure the debt and deal with it. That is what is voiced from over on the other side. You come with this arrangement because we are dealing with the debt, but the manner in which the debt is being dealt with and that to which you have agreed kicks the debt can down the road and places it at the doorstep, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of the government which comes to this Parliament after 2023.
On a point of
order, the honourable member continues to. I have confidence in the people of the country, and I don't think he is succeeding in misleading them. But in the context within which we speak, I think I will have to say he is attempting to mislead the chamber. the restructuring of the debt has been so fundamental and so complete that to suggest that we have kicked the can down the road is such a gross distortion of the reality that I am beginning to wonder who it is that is actually speaking. Because I know Mr. The advisors, and I don't mean White Walker, I mean the other advisors, don't seem to have briefed the Honourable Member very well. We have undertaken a comprehensive restructuring of both the domestic debt and the external debt, to the point where by the time the next government is in place, and it will be a future version of the Barbados Labour Party, it will not be the Breadfruit Party, that government will not have to deal with a debt to GDP ratio of more than 60%. So the can has not been kicked down. We did not promise to eliminate debt. We promised to reduce debt to GDP to 60%, not to eliminate the debt. So we are not extinguishing, as we would, the term we would use, the debt, but we are not kicking any can down the road. Down the road is 60%, and we believe that to be manageable.
Okay.
And that is what we believe in to the country.
Fine. Continue, member.
And that was very well said, except for his obvious penchant with reference to breadfruit. And as a man, honorable man, coming from a rustic area of Barbados, I am a little bit surprised as to his aversion to anything related to breadfruit. And I would dare to suggest to him that based on the results of the last general election in Barbados, he should not for one moment anticipate and predict what the electorate in Barbados will do. Maybe he feels relative safety. Maybe he feels relative safety within the constituency boundaries of St. Peter because they have oft voted Barbados Labour Party. But there are others about him who do not feel that relative safety. And he had better not anticipate to the extent where he predicts, and openly so from this point, what the Barbadian electorate will do in the next general election. And he really shouldn't do that. And I call him back from that. But as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, if you restructure your debt such that your payments begin to fall due under the next administration to lead this country after 2023, you have, in a sense, kicked the can down the road. The debt can, but that is obvious, Mr. Speaker. That is obvious. You've kicked the debt can down the road. You don't have to do it now. You don't have to make the payments now. So you declare a default and you restructure in such a manner that you do not have to look to meet these debts until you begin 2025, Mr. Speaker. 2025, Mr. Speaker. That is after the life of this current administration. And that is all I'm saying. So in a sense, you've kicked the debt can down the road. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central went on to say, every single stakeholder understood what had to be done. Hear me, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Every single stakeholder, and he identified them, private sector, this body, this institution, every single stakeholder understood what had to be done. All realized that the government was now taking urgent action which was necessary. Now, the point I want to make is this, Mr. And the Honourable Member will get to his feet again, or somebody else. The point I want to make is this. The majority of our debt, about $15 billion, was domestic debt, 12 plus. billion domestic debt, 2+ overseas credit. And yet, Mr. Speaker, in a context where everybody understood what had to be done, everybody realized that urgent action had to be taken, early meetings were held with all kinds of interests and private interests and all kinds of other interests, and the Prime Minister was very much involved, and all of that was said earlier, Mr. Speaker. Now I want to ask you, if you would not take pause and ask the question with reference to White Oaks. If the majority of our debt was $12+ billion, and the external debt in relation to that was only $2 billion, and everybody down here in Barbados, institutions and persons alike, understood what had to be done, and that government had to take urgent action, and they were all on board, why did we have to engage White Oak to lead negotiations in Barbados with reference to the domestic debt and pay them so much money? And when first mention was made in this house of White Oak, it was said then that they would lead negotiations with reference to the external credit. I, on my feet, Mr. Deputy Speaker, asked several other questions. Will they be doing anything else? Are they going to be helping us with the domestic credit? Are they going to be helping us with restructuring the statutory corporations? All of those questions I asked. It was said then, and only in that speech, that they would be engaged to help us with our external credit negotiations. I want to ask, if what the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central is telling us, that everybody in Barbados understood, and everybody was on board, and government has the muscle, let me choose my words carefully, to encourage domestic creditors to yield to the position government was taking, why did we have to pay White Oak so much money to help with the local debt?